for this particular problem, Kim is saving for a $200 phone. The horizontal axis, which is this one, is in weeks. So this right here means 12 weeks later. About 12 weeks is 3 months. Right? And while the vertical axis represents how much money she has saved. So right now, right there, at that point, she has how much saved? $100. So that right there is $100, and say that would be 8 weeks. So at 8 weeks, if I go up the graph, can I tell how much money she saved so far? So 8 weeks, she saved 140 bucks. All right, so like at 16 weeks here, she has saved 180 bucks. Any questions? All right, the question first is, what is the slope of the graph? And describe it in context of the problem. So I want the slope of the graph. Now, that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Or you can just look at it, depending on how you see it. What's your rise and run? Might be easier to just look at what's your rise and run. Doesn't really matter where you start from. I'm just going to look at it and go, okay, what's my rise and run? I'm going to go, okay, up right there and over right there. Can you see that? My rise over run. It doesn't matter where you do it. Could I do it here and here? Are they all the same?
Yeah.
So my rise, it looks like I went up from 120 to 140. So is that up a 20? And how far over is that? From a 4 to an 8, how far is that? 4. Can you tell your rise over run is 20 over 4? You could also find coordinates and do the slope formula. I think this is easier just to go, my slope is going to be 20 over 4, rise over run. Did I do that right? Or is it 4 over 20? Rise over run, is it 20 over 4?
2.
Which is 5. And the question then says, put it in context of the problem. What does 5 represent? Can you tell that's a rate of change? Isn't that $5 per what? Per week. So in context of the problem, isn't she saving what? She's saving $5 per week. That's what that's saying. So what is the y-intercept of the graph, and describe it in context of the problem? So are you okay? That's your y-intercept right there? So my y-intercept, okay, to answer that problem, isn't that just 0, 100? That's my y-intercept. So at time 0, I have how much money? $100. So basically, in terms of the problem, can you tell it's basically saying how much she started with? So she started with $100. Or has already saved $100 to start with, however you want to say it. But she started with 100 bucks. That's what it's basically saying in context of the problem. Now, for this one, write the equation of the graph. To get the equation of the graph, we have to think about, okay, are you okay? This is your time, so that's T. What do we want? Units we want for the money? I don't want to put S for saving. I could put M for money, or I'm going to use P for profit. How much profit she has, or just how much money. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to use P. So I'm going to call this equation, put it right down here, P of T, because isn't that what we're leading with? P is our output, T is our input, is equal to, and for an equation, what does she start with? Well, didn't we say 100 bucks? And is she adding or shrinking? She's adding to her savings, and how much per week? $5 per week, 5T. T stands for time. That is our equation for the graph. Now, for this section, what is the domain and range of the graph if Kim stops saving when she gets enough money to buy the phone? How much does she need to buy the phone? 200. So describe what each represents in context of the problem. Domain is our time, our T. This letter right here is your domain. The output is your range, the P. Okay? So T, what possible time values do we have for this situation if she stops at 200 bucks? And what are possible money values that she has at any time within those several weeks? So watch what happens. Let's look at the graph real quick. If we're saying she stops at $200, are you okay that's $200 right there?
Yeah.
So will she stop? The graph technically would stop there. See how the graph goes farther? That should not really be there if you think about when she stops. It's there to kind of see the graph, but technically wouldn't it stop right there at the blue dot? So if we talk about domain, domain is our time. What's the time frame? From 0 to what is that blue dot? What's our time frame range? 20 weeks, right? And here's how you write it. Your domain is written like this. There's two different ways to write it. Isn't it from 0 to 20? Put it in brackets, like these blocky brackets. There is another way of writing it, and here's how you write it. Another way of writing it is this. I like this way better. It's just simpler. This is another way. You may have seen this notation. This is saying t is between 20 and 0. Those are less than or equal to signs. I like this. Now, so that is your domain. All right. So describe it in context of the problem. Well, this is saying, in context of the problem, would that be 20 weeks? She saved for 20 weeks. Is that okay? Okay, so, oops, I got to change it to that. She saved for 20 weeks. That would be the context of the problem. That works. Now the range. The range is talking about how the money looks. From what range is her monies? Now, did she ever have 0 money on this chart? No. Where did she start with?
100.
She started with 100, and how high did she go? 200. So basically, didn't she just save 100 bucks along that time? So my range, if I think about it, my range is going to be from what to what? Well, it's going to be from 100 to what's the highest?
200.
200. That's my range. Home on the range. But the range is what's the span of how much money she had along the time. And you can write that as this. I'm going to put P. Is that okay? For profit or money. And that'd be 200. There's another way. You can also put P of T or P. Either way, I'm okay with that. And then so that, what does that represent in context of the problem? I don't know. You could say she started with 100 bucks and ended with 200 bucks. Or she had a $100 change starting with 100. There's different ways of saying it. Let's just say she started with $100 and ended with $200. Very messy handwriting. So the last question, how long does it take for her to save enough money to buy the phone? Hopefully you can see there she is at 200 bucks. And how many weeks was it? 20 weeks. You can just look at the graph. Sometimes you might have to mess with the equation to find it. The graph showed it this time. Sometimes you might have to plug numbers into the equation or deal with the equation. This one was a lot easier. So we can say the answer to this piece right here is 20 weeks.